Good morning, teacher. Today, we're going to give answers to different points of discussions or questions presented in the book Second Language Acquisition. Let's start with the first question. The first question presents a problematic. In this case, it is stated that a teacher has drilled students in the structure known as indirect questions. In this case, this kind of direct questions could be, do you know where my book is? Do you know what time it is? And did he tell you what time it is? So in this case, we can say that the structure is first the indirect question phrase, then the WH question, then the subject, and actually the verb to be comes after the subject. Here is the problematic. Pupils seem to understand the indirect questions during classes. However, later they say incorrectly a question, such as, do you know where is Mr. Irving? Could you next, please? Yeah, so in this case, I'm going to describe why I think the reason is for this misuse. Could you return to the Yeah. So in this case, I can say that children tend to have a misunderstanding between indirect and direct questions. In this case, we can say that in direct questions, we use the WH question, then we use the verb to be. In this case, it comes before the subject, and then absolutely is the subject. So in this case, this is like a normal question that everyone uses in their daily life. Yeah. But when we use an indirect question, is completely different, as we can see in the structure. So in this case, this can cause a misunderstanding because we always know that when we are making a question, the verb to be should come before the subject. Then next, please. So in this case, we can say that indirect question is used the most when we are in an informal context and in order to be friendly. And we use direct questions in order to be polite and formal. Regarding had the lesson been a waste of time, I think that absolutely not. It was not a waste of time. I think that children just need a little bit of reinforcement about it, and also they should know the difference about indirect questions and direct questions in order to know its structure. And also, they should practice more, like making discussions of those kind of things in order to have a better understanding about it. And actually, that structure will pass to the long-term memory. Then we have, might you go about finding answers to this question? Well, actually, I answer all these questions, and I can say that as a conclusion, students need more practice with that structure, and also students need to know the difference about indirect questions and direct questions. Next, please. Well, in this case, we are going to discuss what is second language acquisition and what is foreign language learning. Well, in second language acquisition, we can say that it is implicit and subconscious. So we didn't realize we are learning that kind of language. We are actually like a sponge. In this case, we absorb the information that is in our context. So, well, it can be developed in informal situations. In this case, it is developed in meaningful interactions, which means that when we are talking with another one about something real and about real situations that could happen. And also, it uses grammatical descriptive grammar. Yeah. So in this case, it is descriptive grammar because it doesn't care about how the language is structured. And in this case, what actually matters is how we use the language instead of the grammatical rules we use. Regarding the foreign language, we can say that it is explicit and conscious because we are aware that we are learning a language. So it happens in formal situations. For example, in the school or in the high school, because it is like a formal instruction. We know that we are learning that language, and for that reason, we have a teacher. In this case, it uses grammatical rules that in this case is known as prescriptive grammar, which means that it is worried about how we use the language, but using also grammatical rules. Yeah, so in this case, rules come first and the use comes later. Next, please. So, well, here is a comparison about learning Spanish in Spain and learning Spanish in United States. First of all, when we are learning Spanish in Spain, we are learning our native language, our first language, our mother tongue. In this case, we absolutely have a direct contact with the language because actually we're in the context of it. And basically, students know how to express the things. However, they don't have the notions about the grammatical structures. So in this case, use comes first, and then the grammar comes later. Then we have learning Spanish in United States. Well, in this case, Spanish is going to be the target language, yeah? And it is foreign language learning. In this case, students experience a contact with the language when they go to the school because there is a formal instruction. And students didn't know how to express meaning. And for that reason, they have to understand grammar first in order to express meaning. And in this case, grammar comes first and the rules comes later. Thank you.
Okay, so then we have the question number 3 that is about consider the difference between child language acquisition and adult second language acquisition. In here we have some commodalities and difference. In commodalities, we have use for communication with others. Let's start with basic sounds and so on. And differences, we have that for young children, we have that mistakes are generally well accepted and are thought as the learning process and not real set structure, much like a first language. As we know, like the kid start like imitating sounds and so. And for adults, we have that structure very formally, much harder to learn. Grammar may not fully develop. So in the book says a sentence that is, I want that toy that boy is playing with. So the question in here is, do you think that this comment is also valid for adults learning a second language? I think that no, because if we're as adults, we are focused in what we're learning or in what we are studying. So it is important to delete this kind of mistakes. Next, please. Then we have create a list of some of the main reasons for the well-attested existence of fossilization in written language. Before to enter to the topic, we have to clarify what is fossilization and what is stabilization. The stabilization is something that is correctable or temporary stop in the learning state. However, fossilization is incorrectable, permanent stop, and it is in the learning result. So in here, fossilization often occurs among street learners. The errors become systematized and are almost impossible to eradicate. The learner inclines to simplify the target language, pays too much attention to the fluency, but neglects the accuracy. So in here we have another term that we have to care about. It is overgeneralization, using the ed suffix to indicate past tense for verbs like go and think. For example, learn when person start learning a new language. For example, in English, we have that in some verbs they like add the ed suffix to the verbs. For example, they could say goeth instead of goes, and so.
So as we know, native speakers has a different type of knowledge. Each individual has a different knowledge and different use of the language, the native language. For example, here we have two sentences that are have him to call me back, and that's the man that I am taller than. Well, for us as foreign language speakers, there are kind of weird for us to understand these sentences because the structures are not similar to those sentences. But for native speakers, they are acceptable because they understand the way that people are speaking at the moment. So for us as foreign language speakers, they are not good enough because we don't understand the grammar because it's grammatically incorrect. But for native speakers, they're okay because it's just at the moment, it's just a spontaneous language. And here we have other example. Let's move to an scenario that people are blessing something. And in Spanish, which peace with you, it's la paz esté con ustedes. And when people, especially when non-native speakers use this phrase, translate directly with con, la paz esté con ustedes, the peace, which peace be with you. But when you ask the same question to a native speaker and use a non-spontaneous language, they produce the blessing in a different way, and they use which peace be to you. And this is the difference between a native speaker and a foreign language speaker. Next, please. So in what ways is a non-native speaker similar to or different from a native speaker knowledge? For example, here we have some sentences, some utterances of an Arabic speaker that know English, and they join the two language and form a new language. For example, I bought a couple of towels. There is many kind of way you make baklava, and there are about 1.5 million inhabitants in Jeddah. Their sentences uses the first language, that is Arabic for the men, and they use some expressions like bakawa, jewa, Jeddah, and use the knowledge that he has, the knowledge that he have been learning during a period of time of trying to acquire this language. But at the same time, it's not a completely, he's not a native speaker.
Well, the question number 7 is about what other reasons might there be for investigating how second language are learned. First, as the book mentioned about, the acquisition of the second language is given in the first place for study reasons, which leads the person who learns the language to have focus their knowledge on some objective, which can be simply study or work. But on the other hand, it can be taken as reasons to study, for example, tourism or culture, or for attraction to the language, which can be influenced by factors such as marketing, admiration for some country, or simply by the need to pass a course or adapt to a society. As question number 8, we have what similarities or difference are there between the native language and the old versions of these pictures. The child number 1, at the time of using the first language, does some more fluency and he is more directly he used the language in natural way, while in the second language he uses more words. The words are more common compared to the child number 2, who uses more colloquial phrases. But when swapping roles, child number 1 uses a more complex language. For example, when they writing in Russian, the child number 1 wrote that in the schoolyard, there is a large garden. Children are digging in the earth. While child number 2 wrote that in the schoolyard there is a large garden. Children are working there.
Okay, let's continue with the question number 9, and we will answer true or false to following the statements, and we will justify them. In this case, any child without cognitive disabilities can learn any language with equal ease. It is false, because doesn't matter if you have or not have cognitive disabilities. All children will have different uh, uh, capacities and different problems to get and acquire a new language. The second one is learning a second language is a matter of learning a new set of habits. It is true, because a new language is not only grammar or structure or words. It has a background and all a culture behind, and we need to acquire and we learn all of this, not only structures. The third one is the only reason that some people cannot learn a second foreign language is that they are insufficiently motivated. It is true, because everyone can learn a new language, and we sometimes put limits, and we said, oh, it is the the higher step that I can get of learning, and we won't learn anymore. The next is all children can learn a second language accent free. It is true, because with practice and with children, it's more effective to learn the accent of a language. No adult can learn a second language accent free. It is false, because every adult can get a language accent free, but in adult is more difficult to get, and they will need more practice for obtain that. The next is all human beings have an innate capacity to learn language. It is true, because it is part of adaptation or a sense of survive, and it happens when we travel to other country, and we acquired all of the language as a sense of survive in that environment. The next is vocabulary is the most important part of learning a second language. It is true. For me, it is true, because if you don't know vocabulary, you will have a lot of limits, and you will be limited to talk in writing, in speaking, in reading, and listening. The next is vocabulary is the most difficult part of learning a second language, and I consider it is false, because the most difficult is the writing, because you need to write in a good way for the different aspects or goals that you will write. The next is language instruction is a waste of time. I consider it is true, because if you go to another city, for example, United States, you will learn as in a before question, and you will read you will live and you will learn in the environment, and you will need the language instruction. The last one is learning a second language takes no more time than learning a first language. It is true, because when we learned our first language, we took all our childhood to learn. But if you go to live to United States or United Kingdom, you will take 3 months to understand everything or the commonly that I said and speak. The next question is, we mentioned that it's difficult to know when learning is easy. This is cause this is the case for our first language as well. To understand this better, think of areas of your first language that you sometimes stumble over. Stumble over is when we think in in a word that we don't understand at the moment that we hear that. For example, the book example is she laid the book on the table. In this case, the word is laid, and this is like a synonym of put, but we can stumble over when we hear that. So we will list two or three words that in our native language can make stumble over us. For example, descambiar. Descambiar, we commonly understand this to change something. For example, yo te doy mi juguete y tú me descambias por tu balón. But this really or currently descambiar means deshacer un cambio. So let's continue with palabra. Palabra we commonly we don't use, but in other countries it is used to say a word that it's bad mention or use it in a bad way, or it's something like a word that could sound rare or weird. For example, él está palabrando. We can understand this that he's talking, but it really means that he is he's saying a word that sounds rare or weird. The last one is peso. In this case, we usually use this word to say préstame un peso, like being paying money, but it could be confused for an foreign speaker when we say this, and they will understand that the peso is a unit of weight, and that's it. Thank you.